Our lab is focused on identifying the molecular pathways at the interface of the two most common neurologic disorders, stroke and dementia. We have two central goals. One is to develop new diagnostic tools to better recognize patients who are at risk for post-stroke cognitive impairment and dementia. And the second is to develop treatments. And based on discoveries we've made in the lab on two major molecular pathways, we're focused on drug development targeting those, and we're hopeful to move those experiments into animals in the next year. The lab uses a multiplicity of methods. We study some of the molecular pathways at the level of cell culture using human and rodent cell models to understand how components of the molecular pathways interact with each other. We also use animal models of stroke and neurodegenerative disease to understand how each of those diseases generates a pathology within the brain and then interact with each other in a living organism. And then, importantly, the lab has a large component studying human patients, focused on clinical translational work, specifically targeting the diagnostic elements that I talked about. Stroke is very common, and we recognize now that the 5-year risk of someone of developing dementia after having a stroke approaches 40 to 50%. And so there's a critical need to understand the relationship between the two. My lab is specifically focused on a type of stroke that occurs in the smaller brain blood vessels. And this affects up to 11 million individuals annually. A sliver of those come in the emergency room with neurologic complaints, but a large proportion of these events are happening silently. And so it's important to develop new tools to recognize and identify patients who are having this progressive disorder that ultimately leads to cognitive impairment and dementia. It's an exciting time because we're very close to developing some of the tools that we talked about to try to mitigate both the risk of stroke and the risk of the complications that can come thereafter. And of course, my motivation is, as a physician scientist, is driven by each individual patient that I take care of.